Imagine, uh, imagine you've just run a marathon. Like you've trained for years for this.
Yeah.
You've pushed through the pain. Your muscles are absolutely screaming.
Yeah.
And you finally cross that finish line. The tape breaks across your chest and you just collapse.
The ultimate relief.
Exactly. You did it. You're catching your breath, feeling that incredible wave of accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
And then an official walks over to you, hands you this heavy backpack and a topographical map of like a 500-mile mountain trek.
Oh, no.
And they say, great warm-up. Now the actual race begins.
That is brutal.
Right. That psychological whiplash, that absolute shock to the system. That is exactly what happens when a startup hits $1 billion.
Yeah, that's the perfect analogy for it.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into Paramendra Kumar Bhagat's 2026 manifesto. It's called Netizen, From Unicorn to Solara. Why product market fit is just the beginning.
And it is a fascinating read.
It really is. And the whole mission today is to completely deconstruct this Silicon Valley obsession with billion-dollar unicorns and, well, map out the blueprint for the next evolution of business, the trillion-dollar Solara.
Yeah, because it's a complete paradigm shift, honestly. We're so conditioned to view that billion-dollar valuation, the unicorn status, as the absolute pinnacle of capitalism.
The finish line.
Exactly. But Bhagat frames it as this dangerous plateau. This text isn't just some manual on how to grind harder to make more money.
Right. It's way deeper than that.
It is. It's a profound philosophical look at human ambition in the age of abundance, and specifically the era of generative AI.
Okay, let's unpack this because, if the unicorn is just the starting line, we have to deconstruct a lot of really deeply held Silicon Valley mythology.
Oh, absolutely.
And I want to ask you, the listener, right now, how many times have you reached a massive goal in your own life, only to realize the hardest work is actually just beginning?
That happens so often.
Right, because the biggest myth of all, the one founders practically worship, is product market fit.
The Holy Grail.
Yeah. There is this pervasive belief that once you achieve PMF, once people actually want to buy the thing you made, you've crossed the desert.
Right. They think the hard part is supposedly over.
Exactly.
Which Bhagat identifies as the exact reason so many startups just die.
Wait, they die even after getting product market fit?
Oh, yeah. They die rich in potential and totally poor in outcomes. Because product market fit is absolutely not the finish line.
Okay.
It is merely the moment the engine catches a spark.
Just a spark.
Right. Without a relentless mechanism for propulsion, that spark just burns out on the runway.
While other people pass you.
Exactly. Hungrier, maybe even technically inferior competitors. They just take off while you're sitting there.
So I was thinking about how to visualize this. It's like a startup without marketing is like a rocket without thrust.
Oh, I like that.
Like you might have this elegant design, brilliant engineering, all the shiny panels, but gravity will always win if you don't have that downward thrust pushing you up.
Gravity always wins. That's just physics.
Right. But the text totally redefines what marketing actually is.
Yeah, that distinction is crucial. Because if you walk into a boardroom today, marketing is usually treated as a megaphone.
Like ads, billboards, social media posts.
Exactly. Branding, ad spend, just general hype.
Yeah.
Bhagat strips all of that away. He redefines marketing entirely as the science and discipline of listening.
Listening, not shouting.
Right. The art of serving through obsessive listening. It's not about talking at the market.
Okay, wait, walk us through the mechanics of that, because he talks about this revenue flywheel, right? How does just listening actually translate into momentum?
Well, it operates as this continuous compounding loop. So you acquire a customer, right?
Right.
And because your marketing is actually rooted in the discipline of listening, you extract highly specific friction points from that customer.
Like what's annoying them?
Exactly. What's hard for them, what they don't understand. And then you feed that raw data back into engineering.
Oh, so the product team actually uses it.
Yes. They refine the product based on that real feedback. And then a better product establishes deeper trust with the user.
Which means they like it more.
Right. And deeper trust reduces the friction of referrals. They tell their friends.
Oh, okay. So
those referrals lower your customer acquisition cost, which naturally accelerates growth.
And growth brings in the money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It attracts a massive influx of capital. You then deploy that capital to acquire a larger cohort of customers, and the whole cycle just skins faster.
Hold on. Let me push back on this a bit.
Sure.
Because this really challenges a comforting idea we all have about meritocracy, right?
Yeah, it does.
We like to believe that the absolute best mousetrap wins. Are we saying that if I engineer a flawlessly superior product, the market isn't going to just naturally reward that?
It absolutely will not.
Wait, really? Not at all.
Not at all. The graveyard of tech is filled with vastly superior products that simply lack distribution.
Wow.
The manifesto is uncompromising on this point. The startups that win are almost never the best product builders.
So who are they?
They're the best growth builders, demand builders, and distribution builders.
Okay, so it's all about how you get it out there.
Right. It's physics, not a nice to have.
Mm.
The logic is simple, distribution is power.
Distribution is power.
Yeah. If you solve a critical human problem, but you cannot distribute that solution efficiently, you don't have a business. You have a secret.
Oh, man. That hits hard. You have a secret.
And secrets don't scale.
Right. A secret doesn't stale. But let's look at the limits of that flywheel for a second.
Okay.
Because if everyone is aggressively listening and spinning their own flywheels, eventually you're going to saturate your core market.
Inevitably, yeah.
The propulsion runs out of fuel. You can't just keep throwing money at the same ads for the same exact product.
Right.
So where does the next stage of exponential growth actually come from?
Well, this is where founders usually fall into what Bagat calls the linear growth trap.
The linear growth trap.
Yeah. They assume that scaling up just means doing the exact same thing, just, harder and louder.
Pushing the same boulder up the hill.
Exactly. But you can't scale a single solitary product to $1 trillion. Real exponential growth requires expansion into what he calls adjacent spaces.
Adjacent spaces. Okay, so how do you practically identify an adjacent space?
Oh.
Because honestly, it sounds like the kind of thing executives try to brainstorm on a whiteboard, and that usually just results in building features nobody actually asked for.
Right, which is why you can't find them in boardrooms or on spreadsheets.
Okay, so where do you find them?
You find them by extending the timeline of your obsessive listening.
Extending the timeline. What does that mean?
It means you stop looking only at the exact moment the customer uses your product,
Okay.
and you start scrutinizing the friction they experience in the 20 minutes before they use it and the 20 minutes after.
Oh, wow. The 20 minutes before and after.
Yeah. Think about your own day-to-day for a second, right? To the listener in, whatever job or project you're managing, are you only focused on the immediate task on your screen?
Most people are.
Right. Or are you looking at the massive bottleneck that happens right before the file gets to you and the headache of what happens after you hit send?
Exactly.
Because those temporal edges, the before and after, that's where the untapped value is hiding.
Think about a historical example, like early Amazon.
Okay, yeah.
Their core product was selling books online, right?
That's well enough.
So the linear growth mindset just says, let's sell more books.
Right, push harder.
But the adjacent space mindset looks at what happens before and after the book is sold.
So what happens before?
Before a transaction, their server infrastructure needs to be incredibly robust just to handle the traffic.
Oh, right, the website has to stay up.
Exactly. And what happens after? Logistics and fulfillment are an absolute nightmare.
Shipping boxes everywhere. Right, so what do? They built AWS to solve the server friction, and they built their own massive fulfillment network to solve the shipping friction.
Wow.
They solved the adjacent friction, and those adjacent spaces eventually eclipsed the original book business entirely.
Bhagat frames this beautifully in the text. He says, marketing is how you hear the market whisper, but adjacent spaces are where the market screams.
It's a great line.
It really is. You tune your ear to the whispers to find out where the genuine pain is causing people to just scream.
And those unaddressed screams are the exact coordinates for your next billion-dollar expansion.
Okay, so let's play this out. You listen to the screams, right? You capture the adjacent spaces, you completely conquer the market, and you hit that magical billion-dollar valuation.
The unicorn.
The unicorn. You ring the bell, the confetti drops. We are so conditioned to view this as the ultimate victory.
Right.
But Bhagat argues this is precisely where the dream quietly dies.
Yes.
Why? Why is $1 billion a death sentence?
Because of the psychological shift that accompanies operational stability.
Operational stability, meaning they feel safe.
Exactly. $1 billion is an incredible financial milestone, obviously. But it often becomes the ceiling of a founder's imagination. When a company reaches that massive size, the existential threat of going bankrupt tomorrow just vanishes.
They can breathe.
They get comfortable. And the moment that comfort sets in, Founders stop acting like relentless builders, and they start acting like risk-averse managers.
Oh, I see. They shift entirely from playing offense to playing defense.
Exactly. They obsess over protecting that $1 billion instead of risking it to build the next $10 billion.
That makes so much sense. The structure probably becomes super bureaucratic, right?
Totally. The urgency dissipates, the meetings get longer, but the physics of the market dictate that the world does not reward comfort.
No, it doesn't.
It rewards relentless execution. If you stop expanding, you are already dying.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you have that funded, upward trending startup, asking your board, how do we become a unicorn, is, according to this text, an insultingly small question.
Too small.
The real question, the only question that matters now is, what is our trillion-dollar trajectory?
The Solara vision.
The Solara vision.
Yeah, a trillion-dollar entity. And we really have to be clear about the mechanics here.
Okay.
Solara is not just a bigger unicorn.
Right.
You don't build a Solara by taking a $1 billion company and just making its sales team 1,000 times larger.
It's not just linear scaling.
No, it requires a fundamental mutation. It is an entirely different species of business architecture.
Which means we have to essentially throw out all the old rules of corporate evolution, right?
Absolutely.
Because under the traditional model of capitalism, if a big company wants to grow, the default move is acquisition.
Right. Big buy small.
Yeah, the big fish swallows the little fish, the founder gets a massive payout, maybe buys a private island, and the innovative little product gets totally absorbed into the giant megacorp.
And Vagat is incredibly sharp in his critique of this specific process. He doesn't call it evolution. He calls it digestion.
Digestion? That is such a visceral, almost grotesque image.
It is. But it's accurate.
Yeah.
Think about what actually happens in a traditional buyout. The acquiring company buys the startup, and then what? They fire the redundant HR and finance departments.
Right, the layoffs.
They strip the product for its core technology, that fast-moving, innovative culture. It dies completely.
Because it's swallowed by corporate rules.
Exactly. The visionary talent leaves because their equity has finally vested.
They cash out and bounce.
Right. And the startup is dissolved in the acid of a giant bureaucracy, turning into what Bagat calls corporate sludge.
Corporate sludge.
Yeah.
Man, he does not hold back.
No, he doesn't. Because it's a zero-sum game. The little fish ceases to exist entirely.
Okay, so if digestion destroys the very innovation you're supposedly trying to scale, what is the alternative? How do you actually build a Solara without just eating your competitors?
By transitioning to what he calls cooperation capitalism.
Cooperation capitalism.
Yeah. Instead of a hostile takeover or a cash buyout that sidelines the founders, you engage in deep structural merging.
Okay, I'm struggling to buy this a little bit.
Why is that?
Because human nature, especially at the elite founder level, is just hyper-competitive.
Oh, for sure.
You're telling me two aggressive, ego-driven founders are just going to happily merge their companies and sing Kumbaya. Yeah. Doesn't one always try to establish dominance over the other?
That's exactly why the math has to fundamentally change. You don't just say, hey, let's be friends.
Right.
You re-architect the cap table entirely. You merge the underlying incentives and the equity so deeply that the success of one is mathematically inextricable from the success of the other.
Oh, so their wallets are tied together.
Exactly. You shift from a zero-sum, you lose, I win mindset to an exponential equation where 2 + 2 = 5.
Or more.
Right? In optimal scenarios, he says 2 + 2 = 10.
But how does a 2 + 2 = 10 math actually function in reality? Like, what are the mechanical levers pulling that massive multiplier?
It comes down to the aggressive unlocking of shared assets.
Shared assets.
Yeah. When you merge rather than digest, you instantly combine distribution networks.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure. If Company A has deep penetration in North America and Company B owns the market in Europe,
Right.
merging instantly gives both of them global reach without spending a single dollar on new customer acquisition.
Oh, wow.
You combine your data sets, which creates a vastly superior intelligence model. You merge your brand trust, your talent pools, all of it.
But the text highlights one specific asset above all of those, right? It calls it the rarest asset in business. Momentum.
Momentum, yes.
Yeah.
Because momentum is incredibly fragile.
It is. Once you lose it, it's so hard to get back.
Exactly. And in a traditional digestion acquisition, momentum is always the very first casualty.
Right, because decision-making speed just plummets.
Everything slows down. Every choice suddenly requires 6 levels of corporate approval.
Ugh, the worst.
The excitement just vanishes. But cooperation capitalism is structurally designed to preserve the velocity of both entities.
So it's like instead of two speeding trains crashing into each other, you are flawlessly aligning their tracks so they pull the combined weight twice as fast.
That's a great way to put it.
And if you successfully orchestrate this, not just once, right, but dozens or hundreds of times, what does that architecture actually look like?
Well, it ceases to look like a traditional company at all.
Really?
Yeah. A Solara is an ecosystem. It's a massive network of highly integrated, mutually beneficial markets.
It's like a web.
Exactly. And it develops a gravitational field so massive that other businesses, creators, and industries naturally begin orbiting it.
Bhagat lays out the progression perfectly here. He says, 1 merger is a leap, 10 mergers is a platform, 100 mergers is a civilization.
A civilization. The ambition embedded in that word is just staggering.
It really is.
You are no longer building an application. You are laying the fundamental infrastructure for a whole society to operate upon.
But building a civilization requires a drastically different kind of architect, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because Silicon Valley has practically mythologized the archetype of the solitary genius.
Right, the lone founder.
Yeah, we love that narrative. The lone savant in a hoodie, micromanaging every single line of code and carrying the entire enterprise on their back.
Well, that archetype is dead in the Solara era.
Dead.
Completely. A solitary genius simply does not have the cognitive bandwidth to manage 100 symbiotic mergers across 50 different adjacent spaces.
They just burn out.
Instantly. The future belongs to what he calls orchestrators.
Orchestrators. So the orchestrator isn't down in the pit playing the cello or banging the timpani.
No.
They are standing at the podium, holding the baton, ensuring that the strings, the brass, and the percussion are all interpreting the exact same symphony at the exact same tempo.
Which demands a profound surrender of control.
That's the hard part.
It is. You have to trust the virtuosos in your ecosystem to do their jobs.
I want to connect this to the listener again. Think about your own trajectory right now. Are you burning yourself out trying to be the solitary genius?
So many people are.
Right. Like white-knuckling every single detail because you think no one else can do it right? Or are you operating as an orchestrator, aligning the momentum of the people around you to build something exponentially larger?
But to be an orchestrator of that magnitude requires one non-negotiable trait.
Which is
Absolute, unwavering clarity on the destination. You cannot orchestrate a symphony if you don't actually know what song you're playing.
oh, that is so true. Which brings us to a really fascinating critique in the manifesto. Bhagat openly mocks the traditional startup strategy of navigating the future.
He really goes after it.
He compares it to Christopher Columbus.
The Columbus strategy, he calls it.
Yeah, explain that because it's hilarious but so accurate.
Well, the Columbus strategy is basically this. You raise some venture capital, you build a sturdy boat, you
Right.
sail west, and you just hope you bump into a lucrative continent.
And whatever random landmass you hit, you just plant your flag and declare a massive victory.
Exactly. He calls it improvisation disguised as bravery.
Ouch.
It's essentially gambling wrapped in the romance of exploration. And he points out, quite ruthlessly, that wandering the ocean hoping to get lucky doesn't reliably get you to India.
And it definitely will never get you to the moon.
No, it won't. The Solara model requires the exact opposite approach.
Right.
It's not about wandering, it's about mapping.
Oh, yeah.
It's knowing the precise coordinates of your destination before you even requisition the wood for the boat.
And Bhagat illustrates this with this incredible historical anecdote from World War II.
Oh, the Gorkha soldier story.
Yes, the Rangoon map. We have to dissect this because
Yeah.
it perfectly encapsulates the psychology of true vision.
It really does. So the story goes that this Gorkha soldier was stationed far up north, but somehow, against impossible odds, he found himself deep behind enemy lines in Rangoon.
Which is incredibly far away.
Very far. He had traversed incredibly hostile, totally unfamiliar jungle terrain. And when he finally reconnected with Allied forces, they were absolutely stunned. They asked him how he managed to navigate and survive all of that.
And he calmly replied that it was easy because he had a map.
Right. So he pulls the map out of his uniform.
But the twist is, it wasn't a topographical map of the hostile jungle he had just crossed.
No.
And it wasn't a map of his starting location.
No, it was a map of the city of Rangoon, the destination.
Just think about the cognitive mechanics of that for a second.
It's vital.
He didn't have a turn-by-turn GPS telling him how to avoid every swamp or every enemy patrol.
Right.
He survived because he walked with Rangoon already solidified in his mind.
Exactly. The manifesto states this so clearly. He moved with certainty because he already possessed the destination.
That is Bhagat's ultimate definition of vision.
Right.
Vision isn't the ability to predict every single obstacle or pivot.
Because you can't predict him.
Exactly. It is the practice of possessing the destination so vividly in your mind that every micro decision you make naturally aligns toward it.
And he asks founders this really piercing question based on that. He asks, every CEO is walking around with a map. What map are you carrying?
Wow.
Is it a map of your current product feature or a map of the future empire?
And this isn't just philosophical poetry, right? Bhagat anchors this directly to hard market economics.
He does. He argues that this specific kind of vision is a premium quantifiable asset.
Let's drill into that. Why does a mental map of a future destination translate to actual financial leverage today? Like, why does it matter to the bottom line?
Because human beings, whether they are institutional investors, top-tier engineers, or enterprise customers, they are desperate for certainty in an intrinsically volatile world.
People hate uncertainty.
Exactly. So markets will always pay a massive premium for clarity. Investors will pay a premium for audacity.
Right.
Elite talent, who could work literally anywhere, will pay a premium, often by taking much lower salaries, for meaning.
They want to build something that matters.
Right. And customers pay a premium for trust.
Trust is built when people sense you are not merely building a tool, but building a world. That line stuck with me.
It's powerful.
Because if a company sells me a highly efficient software tool, I am loyal to them exactly until a competitor releases a tool that is 10% cheaper.
Then you jump ship instantly.
Instantly. But if I believe that company is building the fundamental infrastructure of the future, like a world I am eventually going to live and operate in, I am locked in.
You're fully invested.
I am totally immune to the competitor's discount.
Because future infrastructure commands a premium. It signals inevitable dominance. You aren't just competing in the market anymore, you are becoming the market.
Now, historically, if you wanted to build that kind of world, it took decades of just brute force.
Oh, easily.
You needed thousands of engineers, sprawling server farms, and years of writing foundational code just to pour the concrete.
Well, it was exhausting.
But this is a manifesto written in 2026. The laws of physics in business have radically mutated.
This is the generative AI paradigm shift. Bhagat boils the massive impact of AI down to the total elimination of the traditional bottlenecks. First, he states very bluntly that coding is on autopilot.
Let's contextualize autopilot because I really want to inject some healthy skepticism here.
Do it.
When a text from 2026 says coding is automated, it doesn't mean human engineers have just vanished into the ether.
No, not at all.
It means the friction of translating human logic into machine syntax is gone. The heavy, repetitive lifting of building software architecture is instantly handled by the machine.
Exactly. The bottleneck shifts from can we technically build this to should we build this?
Right.
Software development is no longer the scarce resource that dictates the pace of innovation.
He also points out that research is on autopilot.
That's huge, too.
The agonizing friction of mapping out competitors, scraping consumer behavior data, analyzing long-term market trends, all of that is executed instantly now.
The operational friction of execution has basically been reduced to near zero.
So what does this all mean? The implications of this are monumental.
They are. Because if the friction of coding is gone and the friction of research is gone, what is the new limiting factor in business?
What separates the winner from the loser?
Imagination. Imagination is the new solitary bottleneck.
Ah.
Precisely. A founder with profound clarity of thought can now prototype an entire industry's architecture in the time it used to take a team to build a single beta application.
Just because the tools are so fast.
Right. Bhagat writes this amazing line. The gap between a unicorn founder and a Solara founder is no longer intelligence or capital. It is purely vision.
Because in the age of generative AI, execution is a commodity.
Everyone has it.
Everyone has access to infinite execution. But carrying that map of Rangoon in your mind, the ability to conceive of a trillion-dollar ecosystem, that remains astonishingly rare.
Which naturally brings us to the final fatal hurdle.
Okay, what's the hurdle?
Well, if AI has removed the technical barriers and capital is totally abundant and imagination is the only limit, why isn't every smart founder building a Solara?
Yeah, what is the roadblock if it's all there for the taking?
The single most destructive force in business. human ego.
Ah, the ego trap.
The ego trap.
This is where the manifesto gets into the brutal mathematics of equity, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Founders, almost by definition, are obsessed with control.
Right, as their baby.
They birthed the idea, they suffered for it, and they want to own it.
Pagat breaks down the standard equity reality. He references this classic 30-30-30-10 distribution model.
Okay.
Founders desperately grip onto their 30% piece of the pie. They want to be the undisputed monarch of their domain, no matter how incredibly small that domain actually is.
They are so blinded by the pride of saying, I own 30% of this company, that they completely refuse to engage in cooperation capitalism.
Exactly. They refuse to merge their visions because it would dilute their absolute authority.
And Pagat delivers a crushing mathematical reality check here.
He really does.
He posits that ownership is entirely meaningless if the kingdom is small and dying.
Right. The real choice founders face is not between only 30% or 1%.
The choice is, do you want 30% of a company that is going to plateau, get digested by corporate sludge, and eventually become worthless?
Right.
Or do you have the humility to take 1% of a combined entity that scales into a Solara?
Because 1% of $1 trillion Solara is $10 billion.
And 30% of zero is zero.
Exactly.
$10 billion buys an incomprehensible amount of freedom. It buys you the ability to shape reality.
Yeah, it does.
Ego-driven control just buys you the stress of managing a dying empire.
Well said.
The winners of the AI era will not be the founders who fiercely protect their equity. They will be the orchestrators who strategically multiply it through radical cooperation.
It requires a complete death of the solitary genius ego. You must be willing to be a vital node in a massive, thriving civilization rather than the absolute dictator of a tiny, sinking island.
Okay, we have traversed an immense intellectual landscape today.
We really have.
Let's synthesize this blueprint. The journey to the Solara begins by destroying the myth of product-market fit. PMF is just your admission ticket to the arena.
Exactly. And then you must redefine marketing not as shouting, but as the relentless discipline of listening. You use that listening mechanism to locate the screams in the adjacent spaces.
You have to reject the seductive comfort of the billion-dollar unicorn, recognizing that operational stability is actually the enemy of evolution.
You abandon the zero-sum digestion of traditional capitalism and totally embrace the exponential math of cooperation capitalism, merging momentum and assets to build a gravitational ecosystem.
And most importantly, in an era where AI has commoditized execution, you must recognize that your only true moat is your imagination.
Right.
You must conquer your own ego, willingly dilute your control to multiply your impact, and walk with the map of the future empire already burned into your mind.
Which leaves us with a final provocative question.
Okay, lay it on us.
We've established that AI is putting coding, research, and execution on autopilot.
Right.
If we are truly entering an era where your ability to simply do the hard work is no longer your core value, what is the map you are carrying?
Oh, wow. If the machine can execute the task perfectly, your hands are no longer the asset. Your destination is.
Exactly. In your career, in your projects,
Yeah.
do you have absolute clarity on the future architecture you are trying to build?
Yeah.
Because if you don't possess your own map of Rangoon,
Yeah.
if you don't have a vision for the ecosystem you want to create,
Yeah.
whose gravitational field are you currently orbiting?
If you aren't building the Solara, you are destined to be pulled into someone else's.
Exactly.
That is an incredibly heavy, transformative thought to sit with. It brings us right back to that finish line of the marathon.
Right.
You crossed the Cape, you thought you won, but someone just handed you a map, and the actual trek is just beginning. The mountains are waiting. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep mapping your future, and we'll see you next time.